My fellow Americans,
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, were blocked for the next week and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was still
already
in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me in. He said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society 2 requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. 2 requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hey everybody, welcome to Redacted. Thanks so much for joining us. Today is Wednesday, I believe. It's the 13th of December. This is the show where we question the narratives of the mainstream media. We try to learn with humility. We question things. I'm Natalie Morris.
And I'm Clayton Morris, and we have a very busy show for you on this Wednesday. We're going to be looking at this massive cyber attack, false flag operation. Did you know that the government has been laying the table for this and laying the groundwork for a massive cyber attack that could, in fact, cancel the 2024 election and bring in martial law? Yeah, they've been planning this. This is not a conspiracy theory. They've been running the tests on this, and you won't believe how this is all coming together. We're going to talk about that tonight. Whitney Webb, investigative journalist, has been writing about this. And of course, this week we saw this massive cyber attack that they allege came from China. Really? Did it? So we'll talk with Whitney just in a few minutes about that.
We're also going to bring you an update about the barricade at the border between Poland and Ukraine. What's happening there as Polish farmers continue to say, hey, all of this coddling of Ukraine is actually bad for us. We don't stand for this. Speaking of what we do and don't stand for, universities in the United States, at least, don't stand for free speech. And this distracting conversation about who should and should not be canceled over anti-Semitism, it's not really about anti-Semitism. You know that, and I know that. We're going to break through these narratives as Redacted starts right now.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Wednesday. So glad to have all of you here. Hey, we had a record number of you sign up for our free newsletter yesterday, and I want to thank you for that. Again, it's totally free, and it's our way to stay connected with you. We do that newsletter Monday through Thursday, and it's a great way to start your morning. Again, it's totally free, but it's our way to stay connected because God knows these platforms, you know, you can't put your faith in like Google or any of these big platforms. You have to have your own thing, and that's why we built our own website, redacted.inc. And you just go there, not .com.inc, and just put in your email address, and you will receive a welcome email from me, Clayton, at redacted.inc, and just drag it over into your inbox, not in your spam folder. It might be in your spam folder. Gmail has labeled us as dangerous. I guess they don't like the information we talk about here on the show. But anyway, you might wind up in your spam folder or your junk folder. Just drag it over to your inbox, and then tomorrow morning, you'll receive the newsletter first thing in the morning. We cover a lot of the big stories that we think you need to know about while you were sleeping. And, and we try to do it with a little bit of comedy, a little bit of smiles as well. Try to keep it light, and you can read it in about 5 minutes. Anyway, go to redacted.inc is the place to go. Redacted.inc. Is the deep state mafia setting up a massive cyber attack false flag on the American people that will disrupt the 2024 election? Well, it turns out that the United States intel agencies have been running tabletop exercises on this exact scenario. And now the Department of Homeland Security head Mayorkas says the greatest cyber threat to America is something called killware. So what's really going on here? Are we being set up for a massive false flag? And investigative journalist Whitney Webb has been writing about these cyber attack tabletop exercises for years, and she's been exposing what they've been up to. And then this week we had a crazy quote-unquote cyber attack that seemed to shut down half the internet this week. Banks and Rumble was down. And what exactly is going on here? Are we being played like a fiddle? Whitney Webb joins us right now. Whitney, when you saw this big cyber attack unfolding this week, did you say, oh, here we go? Or is this maybe perhaps totally unrelated to your investigations?
Well, I would keep in mind, for those that may not remember, a few years ago, the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, talked about a cyber pandemic, right?
Right.
Which implied that that there was to be in the near future what he described as something having significantly worse consequences for people worldwide than COVID. That was going to be, a cyber pandemic, meaning a series of cyber attacks. So I think that's essentially what's being foreshadowed here. And I think, we're if we follow some other WEF warnings, like we talked about last time, it's quite possible that we'll be seeing an escalation of, what we've seen just this past week. But what matters also, and what doesn't get enough coverage, in my opinion, is, how the attribution of who's allegedly responsible for these attacks. So if you look at, the recent news that allege that some Chinese military-linked group called Volt Typhoon was embedded in U.S. national infrastructure. The only sources for that cited in those reports as to why that group is deemed to be Chinese, and the only groups allegedly finding them in these national systems of critical importance nationally are groups like MAFTU, as we talked about last time, helped create the CTI League, and also the CISA agency. Their longtime head, though I don't think he's head anymore, but he was head at the time that agency was created, Chris Krebs, is former head of cybersecurity at Microsoft, and Microsoft also has a lot of connections to Cyber Reason, a group that's been doing a lot of these tabletop simulations that you referred to earlier. And then the other group besides Microsoft is called Recorded Future, and they were created with seed funding from Google Ventures and the CIA's InQtel. And they rarely, if ever, provide any direct evidence as to why a group is, Chinese or Iranian or North Korean or Russian. A lot of these groups, including, more notorious ones that blame stuff on Russian hackers during like the 2016 elections, like, CrowdStrike, for example, more often than not, they don't give any actual evidence. They say, we suspect, or this group behaves similarly to a group that is, of these various nationalities. And we need evidence, especially since WikiLeaks release of Vault 7, that the CIA and affiliated intelligence agencies in Five Eyes and beyond can blame any nation state they want by placing false fingerprints of various nation state actors in attacks, cyber attacks they actually conduct themselves. And the importance of that, when you're talking about attribution, is that, who's to blame for this catastrophic cyber attack? And it's very possible to have, an extreme psyop conducted on the American population that could push us into, World War III, which I think, the risk of that is much clearer to people now than it was even, a few months ago.
Yeah, Colonel Douglas McGregor on our show has openly pointed out he believes that they may end up canceling the 2024 election, that martial law will be put in place, that there will be some sort of move to push Biden into a martial law situation. The 2024 election would be canceled in some capacity, and it will be totally controlled. And of course, your reporting with these tabletop exercises seems to suggest that this need for martial law would come as a result of a massive cyber attack. So can you talk about these tabletop exercises and what these agencies have been planning? And I mean, it's amazing to me that they're literally planning it. They've got the paperwork. They've been running the operations. This is not a conspiracy theory. They're laying the groundwork for this.
Yes. So the exact scenario which Colonel McGregor discussed on your show has been simulated for years by the FBI, DHS, and various police departments, not just in the U.S., but also I believe they had one in the United Kingdom as well. And the company responsible for this is based in Boston. They're called Cyber Reason. They're a cybersecurity company with very overt ties to Israeli intelligence. And essentially what they conducted in this simulation was an attack on the election, but it wasn't an attack on election infrastructure. It was an attack on critical infrastructure and also things like hacking traffic lights to cause accidents and kill people in car accidents, hacking self-driving cars to run over people waiting in line to vote. And hacking power grid and all sorts of things like that. So why are they conducting simulations supposedly about election security, but there was nothing about voting machines or, election infrastructure at all? It was about just murdering innocent people and destroying critical infrastructure or, jamming it essentially. And then, not that long after, the head of DHS, Alexander Mayorkas, said that this exact type of hacks, which he referred to as killware, is going to be the next big cyber attack. Which of course is deeply unsettling. And even more unsettling is that Cyber Reason, the head of Cyber Reason, Lear Div, says that his work at Cyber Reason is a direct continuation of his service to Israel's Signal Intelligence Agency, Unit 8200. And while there, Lear Div specialized in offensive cyber attacks targeting other nations, not unlike Ohad Zaydenberg of the CTI League. And it's important to mind that the head of the WEF, Partnership Against Cybercrime, that's leading this push for a regulated internet due to a coming cyber attack on critical infrastructure and the financial system, is an Israeli intelligence operative named Tal Goldstein that essentially created the model by which the companies that Ohad Zaydenberg and also Lear Div Cyber Reason follow, essentially, basically, the policy Goldstein created back in 2012, while Netanyahu was prime minister back then, and of course still is now, is that Israeli cybersecurity operation, or cyber operations that were previously conducted by Mossad or other Israeli intelligence agencies that used to be done in-house are now going to be done through private companies. And that same year, for example, 2012, is when Cyber Reason was created by Lear Div, who says that his Cyber Reason is a direct continuation of his work at Unit 8200, which was offensive attacks on other nations. So just really crazy when you again consider what we talked about last time, that Israeli intelligence has a deliberate policy of getting the U.S. to preemptively, or at least attack Iran first when they want to bring in a regional war into the fore. So
it's incredibly troubling. We think about when we know that they can place digital footprints, digital fingerprints on anything, and they can claim that, oh, it's Iran. Yep. The reason all of your banks are down, you can't get access to your monies because, Iran just launched a massive cyber attack. And we're telling you that that's the case because Israeli intelligence is telling us. How can we believe them at all? And then what are we to do? Launch some massive military strike against Iran?
And this is why evidence matters, because all of the companies essentially up to now that are being reported in mainstream media as the ones attributing blame to these nation states are either funded directly by the CIA or Unit 8200 or people related to these intelligence agencies.
People, wake up.
And we need better evidence than that.
Wake up. I mean, I hope people are paying attention to this, and people can yell and say whatever they want. They can say, that's anti-Semitic, whatever. Go, jump off a bridge. That's ridiculous. Like, these people are funded by these intelligence agencies. agencies. You are not stupid. Please, people, wake up and pay attention to what they're doing. And you're seeing, of course, runs on banks. You're seeing people concerned about how are they going to be able to get cash. They're driving us away from cash. They're driving us towards a central bank digital currency. They're driving us away or towards digital and away from cash. You already see what the European Central Bank is doing to limit your ability to use cash. You will be considered a terrorist on the gray market if you use more than, I think it's 1,000 euros for a transaction. That comes right out of the mouth of Christine Lagarde. That's policy now. So I think you're starting to see the scarcity of cash, and then of course the concerns about getting access to your digital banks. Very, very troubling if they can manipulate all of that with the flip of a switch.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very disturbing, and the only way to get people to agree to give away all of those freedoms is to have them scared and panicked about something. And again, like we talked about last time, I think the extreme involvement of banks in a lot of these simulations, whether it's Cyber Polygon or other things that are similar that went on through this WEF partnership against cybercrime or the Carnegie Endowment's equivalent program, it's very, they know that things are going to get bad in the financial system, and they don't want to be to blame this time, at least publicly, what they were in 2008. So what better way to not only absolve yourself of blame and be able to blame some faceless hacker, but also push for the predetermined solution that you want to impose on people, than having this cyber attack where we have to have a completely regulated internet and have to be able to tie people's digital IDs to everything they do online. And then, of course, to their money as well, because it's not just a push for ending online anonymity. It's a completely related push to ending financial anonymity as well. And we're seeing this also with major efforts of the DOJ, a member of the WEF partnership against cybercrime, to go after all of these crypto exchanges to surveil people's transactions there more than ever before. I mean, if you look at what happened with the recent settlement with Binance, now the U.S. government can surveil transactions to an extreme degree compared to how it was before. And I think that's likely to keep progressing as some of these new policies promoted that are being sought by the U.S. Treasury, for example, get approved. There's not just there's a coming push to push all of our money into the digital realm, and it's happening alongside an unprecedented push to surveil that digital money. So people need to be very aware that there's a lot of Orwellian solutions that are going to be pushed in the wake of this apparently coming cyber attack, aside from the war angle. And it's a very deeply unsettling situation. But to go back to these simulations for a second, I mentioned the things that they talked about doing, but I did forget to say that what they concluded was that there was going to be the election canceled and martial law declared. Essentially, what they were doing in that simulation was finding the precise things that needed to happen in order to trigger that response.
So what were the precise things?
Why is DHS and the FBI studying that with this company tied to Israeli intelligence, which, by the way, is heavily partnered with Lockheed Martin and has access to a lot of U.S. military systems directly because of that partnership.
So let's be precise then. What specifically, as a part of the Cyber Reason tabletop exercises, did the FBI and the intelligence community put together that said these certain items need to happen in order for martial law to take place, President Biden to become, dictator, basically, cancel an election? What precise things would have to happen in these tabletop exercises through this cyber attack?
Well, these simulations happened during the Trump administration, back around the time of the 2020 election. And essentially, it was a team composed of employees from Cyber Reason, almost all of which were veterans of this particular intelligence service. And the people that were trying to defend against these cyber attacks in the simulation were DHS and the FBI. So essentially, you had Cyber Reason employees gauging the reaction in order to obtain this particular outcome. But again, you have Alexander Mayorkas, after the simulation takes place, saying that same exact type of attack, these killware attacks, are going to be the next big thing. And
but what would trigger? But what would trigger? What would trigger something that would rise to the level of martial law? I mean, it happened at the tail end of the Trump administration, so now it's under the Biden administration, and then we're heading into the 2024 election. Is it electric grid collapses? Banking system collapses or is blocked, and that's what would trigger it? What would trigger it?
So in these particular simulations, it didn't even go that far. It was much smaller. It was things like, again, the hacking of self-driving cars, of traffic lights, and a lot of emphasis on social media and misinformation.
So it's that small? It's just traffic lights and misinformation.
Causing panic and fear and people being run over by self-driving cars, which, by the way, Vice did an investigation where they interviewed people from Unit 8200 several years ago about how simple it is to hack not just self-driving cars, but anyone's car.
Well, I was a part of a big investigation. We went out to Pittsburgh and I sat with hackers who managed to hack into these cars, and I drove one of these vehicles, and I was driving it, had total control myself. And then they remotely took control of the car and ran me right into a ditch to show us that they could take total control of the car. And we had it all on camera, and we filmed the whole thing, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't control the wheel. I couldn't do anything. They ran me right off the road, and it was for a segment. We were filming it and trying to understand how this technology worked. They almost ran me right into a tree, by the way, and they later apologized for it. But we were speeding. We were going pretty fast, and it ran me right off almost into a tree in a ditch. So yeah, they can do this if they want. And this was 8 years ago. Imagine how sophisticated the technology is now.
Yeah. Again, it's definitely disturbing stuff. I wish more people would be paying attention to this, particularly the attribution side, and how extensively this has been gamed out by our national security agencies, think tanks tied to national security, and a lot of these contractors either tied to U.S. or Israeli intelligence. And in talking about all this stuff, I'm certainly not trying at all to pick on Israel, but what I do want to emphasize is that a lot of conservatives specifically have a blind spot here. Israel, just like the U.S., has a deep state, and it has for a very, very long time. And if you go back to events like Iran-Contra and every sort of CIA scandal, essentially, from then on, the Israeli and American deep states collaborate very, very frequently on all sorts of things. And I think that's likely what we're seeing here as well in terms of this buildup. And it's, again, incredibly unsettling. And I do want to make clear, too, that both the American deep state and the Israeli deep state have no problems killing their own people to get what they want and advance their ultimate goal of more power and control and money for themselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. We've seen that. Well, they will kill presidents of the United States. We know that they've done that as well, JFK. I'll get you out of here on this, Whitney, which is this week we saw this massive cyber attack, if you want to call it that. Where do you think the fingerprints there lie with this cyber attack this week as you're studying how this thing was unfolding this week and listening to the media's response to it? We were told China.
Are you referring to the one that was blamed on China, or the one on Rumble that you also mentioned? Okay, so as far as I read about the China...
Yeah, I think it was connected because it was the same day. Rumble was attacked, Netflix was down, banks were being hit, allegedly. But yeah, we were hearing immediately it's China.
Yeah, so, again, I only really read the articles, I believe, that were put up by the Washington Post that got a lot of circulation on those attacks. I unfortunately didn't have time to dig too deeply into all of the reporting on it. But in those particular articles, it didn't talk about so much what the alleged attacks were more that it was a lot of probing, or that they were embedded in national infrastructure seen there, this particular group, which again they referred to as Volt Typhoon. And the article itself was mostly people from think tanks or former national security talking about Chinese hackers, and there was really very little substance as far as to what the actual attacks or probing were. and how they know that Volt Typhoon is affiliated with China, and essentially nothing on why they believe it's affiliated with China. And again, what was said about what they were actually doing came from this group, Recorded Future, which was created with CIA money. And then this other, and then Microsoft, which again is deeply embedded with the CTI League, Cyber Reason, all other sorts of stuff. And, obviously through its affiliation with people like Bill Gates is definitely a big part of the push for, globalism more broadly, and, all other sorts of things. And it's important to keep in mind that Microsoft is a major contractor for the U.S. national security state, and also for the Israeli national security state.
And now Ukraine.
And want to have their software put on all voting machines. It's called Election Guard. I wrote about that software back for Mint Press News a few years ago. And it's directly affiliated with NewsGuard, the censorship engine that's been under fire, and I think recently sued by some big names as of late. If NewsGuard was engaged in malfeasance, do you think Election Guard won't be? I would be kind of naive.
Right. No, Election Guard's going to save us. Exactly. Oh, boy. I mean, George Orwell must be rolling over. It's unbelievable. Whitney Webb, as always, thank you so much. I encourage all of our viewers to go and read Whitney's great website. It's unlimitedhangout.com, right? Have I got the URL correct? Unlimitedhangout.com.
Yep.
You can check Whitney's great reporting and investigations, following the money. And so hopefully people wake up when they hear these stories, when they read a Washington Post story, they understand where this money is coming from. Whitney, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again. Take care.
That it can be as small or as minimal as snarling traffic lights.
Right.
Snarling traffic lights and doing something small that can lead to martial law. It doesn't have to be the electric grid going down or something massive. It can be small.
Right. There was a story in that book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, where one of the women who was in on the cyber reporter, Nicole Perlroth. Sorry,
someone says we have no audio. I guess we have you guys were.
No, it's on. Yeah, it's back on. For some reason, cutting to the slider. I don't know if cutting out the sound just didn't come on. It's fixed.
Okay, we're
we're back.
Okay, good.
Okay, so
yeah, that was my bad. I got a little antsy with I got a little handsy with my buttons.
Oh,
okay.
We're good. We are good. We're good.
The wrong button.
We're good. Sound all right.
How much did we get?
It's funny. I can see the chat just going crazy, and it was like they're like no audio. Everyone's like, and so I can see it moving so fast. I'm like, were we just attacked? Was there like a 9/11 attack just now?
Speaking of,
oh my God, like that scared me.
Yikes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was going to tell the story of an anecdote from the book This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends from cyber reporter Nicole Perlroth, who said that she met with a hacker and she said, well, I didn't get a Jeep because I knew that you could hack into those. And he goes, oh, well, what hotel are you staying at? And she told him, and he said, oh, but I can hack that elevator. So nowhere is safe. Nowhere is safe. And as Philip was talking about, I mean, any modern car doesn't have to be a Tesla. Any modern car is completely controllable now. And of course, they want to add these kill switches into these vehicles as well. Right. That's, moving through the United States right now, this idea of a kill switch.
I mean, I'm kind of limited on what vehicle choices I can have going on in the future, because I absolutely refuse to buy a vehicle that has internet connectivity. So I own a 2008. I don't know if I could go much beyond that. That might be like 2010 might be the most modern car I can buy. I don't know.
The last
I refuse.
time.
I won't do it.
It's like the Battlestar Galactica. You'll just constantly be, it's not connected to the internet. It's the only surviving craft. It's like it's not plugged into the network, so the Cylons can't get us. But it's crazy, and it's actually not crazy. They are literally doing these tests and tabletop exercises right now to prepare us for it. We've got more news to get to here. We're going to look at this Poland backing down on Ukraine story. You know, Zelensky just came to Washington, D.C., was asking for a lot of money. He didn't get very much money at all. He asked for $61 billion. He left with a few million. That didn't happen. And it was not a warm reception like he's experienced in the past. But Poland has backed down to Ukraine with these border crossings and the blockade. And today actually marks an important anniversary in Polish history. Talking about martial law, this was 42 years ago today in Poland, martial law instituted. So we'll look at that. But first, right now, I mean, we're starting to see the signs of a recession flowing at the first quarter of next year. And you saw Warren Buffett selling off billions of dollars in stock. Something is coming. The warning signs are getting louder and louder, but, you know, maybe we'll be lucky with the Fed, you know, not increasing rates anymore, maybe lowering rates. Maybe we will dodge a bullet somehow in this first quarter and we will not hit a recession, but all signs seem to be pointing in that direction. Right now, it's very difficult for people to pay their rent, very difficult for people to, to buy groceries with inflation. And that's why we're so bullish on gold and silver, precious metals as a hedge against inflation. If you've got like $1,000 sitting in a savings account or a few $100s sitting in a savings account, converting that to gold and silver where it won't lose value, which the US dollar is continuing to lose value every day. I mean, heck, my son just came up here in the studio a few moments ago and he said, 33 trillion, that's the national debt? How is that possible? How is the United States government operating? He saw the numbers on the big board here and he couldn't believe it. So it's no secret the United States government is in deep trouble with its spending. Now, maybe that's why Zelensky didn't get that $61 billion. Sorry, we don't have the money right now. But if you're interested in investing in gold, our friends over at Lear Capital will help you get set up and start purchasing precious metals today. Or you can even convert part of an old IRA that's been sitting there that you've been just like sitting on in the stock market. Or maybe you left an old job and you've got an old 401k that's been sitting there. You can actually convert that to a gold and silver IRA. You can call Lear Capital today. Call them 1-800-613-3557 right there on your screen. And it's also in our description of our video as well, if you want to check that out. Or you can go to learredacted.com, L-E-A-R, redacted.com. But again, that 1-800 number, they love to talk to you on the phone. Get your free gold and silver guide right now by calling their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557. They've got thousands of 5-star reviews, 25 years of experience helping people buy gold and silver and converting their old IRAs into precious metals IRAs. 1-800-613-3557. Over the past few hours, police in Poland began to clear blockades going into Ukraine, allowing supplies to start flowing back into that country, of course, over the past few weeks. Polish truckers and show of solidarity saying enough is enough. Stop importing things in from Ukraine at a very cheap price when Polish farmers, Polish truckers are being slammed. So it looks like a lot of this is now flowing back into Ukraine once again. Overnight, we saw, of course, Poland has a new prime minister, Donald Tusk. And what does this mean for the future of Poland? A lot of people coming out saying, well, he's going to undo a lot of the immigration policies, a lot of the conservative policies that have been put in place and sort of opened Poland to a mass wave of migration. And joining us today on 42 years ago on this very day, we saw, of course, history tells us that Poland instituted martial law to clamp down on opposition protesters. They rolled tanks into the streets of Warsaw, censored the media, or so they tell us. Did that stave off a Soviet invasion? So a lot of things happening in Poland on this 42nd anniversary of martial law. We thought we'd bring in Mike Krupa, who is a journalist in Warsaw, Poland, host of Vodem TV, to make sense of all of it. Mike, who would have thought Poland be the center of discussion right now in Europe? A lot of major changes. First of all, can you talk about this blockade? What does this mean for Ukraine? What does this mean for the Polish truckers?
Well, hello, Clayton. It's great to be back. Well, first of all, in terms of the blockade, what we have to realize is that yesterday we got news that the mayor of one of the districts where the blockade was taking place on the border crossing in Dorohusk, I believe, he came out with a decision that the arrangement between him and the truckers was apparently broken by the truckers' side. And he says the law was broken, so we're going to have to end the blockade. Now, the truckers said they didn't break any arrangements. They wanted to continue. However, it was reported yesterday that at least 100 trucks on that crossing made their way to Ukraine. So there was a back and forth. Apparently, the mayor did threaten to use police force to get the truckers out of there. But you have to realize the truckers that are there, I mean, there's a lot of them there. So if the police were to engage them in sort of a brawl, it would kind of look ugly on television, especially with the new government just being inaugurated in Poland, the new left liberal government of Donald Tusk. So I'm pretty sure in terms of optics, that would not be something that anybody in Poland would like to see. However, there are some rumblings because it was four border crossings out of 8 with Ukraine that were blocked. So the Ukrainians are appealing to open up the other ones. The truckers are somewhat reluctant, although from the decisions coming from the EU, from the Trade Commissioner, and from the signs that are coming from the newly formed government, although they haven't been really adamant about this thus far, but I'm guessing what's going to happen is that, and if you believe what Donald Tusk said, I believe yesterday or today, that one of the first priorities of this government is to keep the flow of global help to Ukraine, as he called it, going. So it's sort of like reminiscent of, Mike Johnson becoming speaker, and the first thing he says is, by the way, my priority is going to be giving how many billion more to Israel? So it's that same mentality, Poland last, Ukraine first. Now the question is how long that will last. The truckers, they're still there. The blockade on one border crossing has been dropped. Apparently, the Slovak truck drivers have been signaling to the Polish truckers, and I think they did a blockade yesterday for a few hours. It's been a back and forth on Slovakia. There's always been appeal because what happens is they wanted this to be a united front, so get the Hungarians in, get the Slovaks in, and get the Poles in. So you basically create this wide wall, a barrier that would prevent the Ukrainians coming into the European Union without a permit. That's one thing. So you're basically undercutting prices for all the truckers that are in the European Union and destroying their businesses. But another thing is, you're bringing a lot of weird things into Ukraine. There have been reports of motorboats going into Ukraine, Ferraris going into Ukraine. Somebody obviously wants to make off with a lot of money after the entire Kiev regime collapses. Obviously, they're saying that, these Polish truckers are working for Vladimir Putin because they're not allowing military aid and humanitarian aid. And the truckers have been very adamant that those are actually the things that they've been letting through, but everything else has to be stopped. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah, we've seen video images. We've shown them here on the show of full flatbed or full trucks filled with luxury cars. And Polish truckers are saying, why is this being delivered into Ukraine? Like, why are luxury goods flowing in? You talk about motorboats and all sorts of luxury goods. Why is that stuff flowing into Ukraine?
Well, as I said, Ukraine is the Somalia of Europe. When you have a country that is the most corrupt country in Europe, that's basically a country in the thralls of war. The regime is collapsing. I think you need a lot. Well, it's kind of interesting because you would actually think that a lot of those products would be going the other way, so leaving Ukraine. But maybe they know that the only place that they can escape some of these people in Kiev is going to be Western Ukraine, and it's better to have the toys there than throw them outside the country just in case the EU reinstates the permit system again. So, but obviously this is not military help, and this is going to people who I don't think have the best interest of the Ukrainian people at heart. I think the only thing that they really care about is how much they're lining their pockets.
Donald Tusk is the new prime minister, of course, put in power over the past 24 hours. A lot of people upset about this online, as you mentioned, lefty liberal, a lot of conservatives saying, this is going to lead to mass migration from many third world countries. He's going to bring Poland much closer to the European Union, that he's a European Union shill. As you mentioned, Poland last, Europe first. So what do you make of this new prime minister, and what do you think this portends for the Polish people?
Well, I don't expect anything good in terms of the political agenda and any serious reforms that we need. Like, for example, a Poland first patriotic immigration reform, which we desperately need if we want to remain Poland, basically. So, there's a slogan going around, keep Poland Polish. That's somehow racist, apparently, and anti-Semitic, as some people, I don't know why, but whatever. But in terms of policy, I don't expect anything good. However, because this coalition is made up of essentially 4 parties, so we got the Civic Platform, which is Donald Tusk, and they are the main party. We have the Polish Peasants' Party. We have what's called Poland 2050. So these are basically liberal voters who once voted for Tusk, but then believed he sort of became too lousy in governing, so they created a new party. And then we have the ultra-hard left, which is basically called the left in Poland. These are the ultra-wokesters, the turbo diesel wokesters, as some people call them. So there's basically four parties making up this coalition. Now, from the names that I've seen that will be in the new government, we have, for example, Radoslaw Sikorski, the husband of Anne Applebaum, coming back to take over the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
He's the guy that famously tweeted after the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, famously tweeted out, "Thank you, America," and then doubled down on it, and then later deleted that tweet. Yeah,
that's it. That's Radoslaw Sikorski. The interesting thing about Radoslaw Sikorski, though, is that if you look at his bio and look at some of the things he did, like, for example, in 2014, in February 2014, he was actually in Kiev mediating the talks between the opposition and the President Yanukovych at the time. And there's this famous scene as they're coming out. This was before February 24th. They're coming out of the negotiations, and the Ukrainians are the opposition, the ruling party right now, in essence, in Ukraine, is complaining to Sikorski that, we gave too much, And Sikorski said, if you don't comply with this, you're all going to be dead tomorrow. So he was basically telling them, sit down, end this entire Maidan rebellion, because you're not going to have a country anymore, which sort of seemed like a realist sentiment at the time. But as soon as, the neo-Nazi guys came in the next day, as soon as Yanukovych was forced to flee, Sikorski changed his tune. So he's very unreliable in terms of keeping his words, because let's not forget that it was Poland and Germany at the time that were the guarantors of this sort of ceasefire between the opposition and the Yanukovych administration. So, yeah, Radoslaw Sikorski is coming back. We're obviously going to have Donald Tusk as prime minister. We're going to have I forgot her name. I think it's Barbara Nowacka. She's going to be minister of education, heavy duty wokesters. So I'm pretty sure a lot of conservative parents organizations are going to get a new flow of energy in the next couple of months. But the essential question right now is, it's a four-party coalition. The Polish state-run companies, Polish state television, for example, which is a multi-billion-dollar operation. That's a huge pie to divide, and everybody's going to want to have a piece. And I'm predicting, and I think I already predicted this on your show back in October, that within 18 months before a new president is elected in Poland, this coalition is going to collapse, because there's going to be too many inconsistencies and there's going to be too many dividing lines between these four parties that they're going to call early elections. That's my prediction. We've actually never had a four-party ruling coalition in Poland ever. The most we've ever had was two-party in terms of individual parties, but four parties, that's something we haven't seen before, at least not that I'm aware of after 1989. Someone might correct me in the comments, but yeah, four parties, a lot to cut up. So I'm giving them 18 months before this house of cards collapses, hopefully.
And what's going to happen under this new administration with the millions of Ukrainian refugees that are in Poland? Will that change the dynamic there at all?
Well, I think one of the preferred, I'm not sure if you actually got the nomination, but the candidate for Minister of Justice is one Adam Bodnar. And Adam Bodnar used to be the ombudsman for human rights in Poland. So a few years back, he tweeted that wouldn't it be wonderful if the new Ukrainian arrivals in Poland, this was a year or two before the war, the new arrivals in Poland would be able to vote at least in local elections. We should give them voting rights at least in local elections. And if you looked at the web of NGOs, some of them you can directly connect to George Soros, things calling themselves Center for Migrant Rights and so on. There was already a push, at least since 2016, 2017, to prepare the ground for turning Poland into a sort of Ukraino-Poland multicultural entity. You're not going to bring 1 million Muslims into Poland because Muslims are brown. That's a totally different religion. Poles are going to get pissed. But Ukrainians, we can sort of justify that. We get the cheap labor. They're white. They're formerly Christian. You only see the differences after some time. But they're there, obviously. So I think the agenda of this government, sadly, is going to be to ramp up this multicultural narrative that these Ukrainians that came to Poland before the war, and especially after the war, we need to be hospitable. We need to host them. They have to get a lot of, the social help that the regular Polish citizens get, and so on and so on. And oh, by the way, why don't we bring in more and more and more? And especially if Bodnar becomes Minister of Justice, you can see an acceleration of this multicultural drive towards what many are calling Ukraino-Poland, which is being slowly formed in our, right before us by the ruling elites and the globalists in Warsaw, unfortunately.
Well, so you'll have a new name. It won't be Poland anymore. Ukraino-Poland. Ukraino-Poland.
Ukraino-Poland, exactly.
Ukraino-Poland. Unbelievable. And given voting rights, making a total change to the country. We're out of time, but Mike, I really want to thank you so much for this perspective. Really interesting to see what's happening with this blockade, the new government there, and on this 42nd anniversary of this martial law, which it's very interesting to dive more deeply into that. And I think I think you would say maybe read, I guess, beneath the headlines a little bit. It's not as it seems, right? That there's more to that story than just martial law, right?
Yeah, as a historian by training, I can say that I've done a lot of revisionist research on this topic in the last couple of years. And whereas at one point in my life, I would believe that General Wojciech Jaruzelski, God rest his soul, was the ultimate villain in Polish history, it turns out that somebody was weaving a narrative to, convince people that he was the worst villain in Polish history. He might not have been the best of guys, but there's a whole new school of thought pertaining to martial law, where it turns out that actually the Soviets were seriously contemplating an invasion. And there's a lot of evidence to point out that Jaruzelski introduced martial law first and foremost to stave off the Soviet invasion, and not, as the mainstream story goes, to crush solidarity, crush the opposition, and so on. So that's obviously a discussion for another time, but there is a new school of thought in Poland on this. And 42 years ago, a lot of sane people saw this, but unfortunately for years they were censored. Now these new voices are coming out with younger historians, and I hope that discussion will keep on going, because maybe it's not the most important thing that millennials are thinking about in Poland right now, but it's certainly something that sheds light on our geopolitical situation, for example, after 1989, and why many of the things that occurred indeed occurred.
Stopping a communist invasion. It's worth exploring those documents that have been declassified over the past few years, the CIA documents on this martial law situation. Yes, truth, shining a light on truth and transparency is always important. Mike, great to see you. Thank you for always bringing an astute level of conversation to the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Clayton.
Thanks. So Ukraino-Poland. What do you guys think about that? That'll be the new name. Ukraino-Poland. How do our Polish friends feel about that? Let us know in the chat below.
I don't know. I mean, the history really matters about what they've been through, and this context, it's just lost. I read a great quote over the weekend that C.S. Lewis would say that for every 3 books you read, you should read one old book, just to give you the context, right? And that's a great ratio to make sure that you don't forget where we've come from and what the context is of history.
If you can still find old books, if they're not getting rid of them,
well,
burning them, hiding them, keeping them out of your way. Great stuff there. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate that. We've got more news to get to.
That's how I read my notes in college. I always like, when I got home every night when I went to study, I would always read my notes from the day, my notes from 1 week ago, and my notes for 2 weeks ago. And I did that every single day, just always going back and checking the information that
there's a service that I learned about a year and a half ago from my friend David Sparks over at the Mac Power Users podcast called ReadWise. And it's a really interesting service. They're not like a sponsor or anything like that, but Natalie and I both use it because we take so many notes in our digital books. And sometimes it's lost, right? Because unless you go back and search through those notes digitally, you're not using it on a regular basis. Anyways, ReadWise resurfaces it and sends you a daily email with like a digest of things that you've highlighted over the past 3 years, 4 years, 1 year. So it'll have like a quote that you've highlighted from a book that you read a year ago, and it'll put it in a digest of like 3 to 5 other quotes. And it's a great thing. You're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. And it was something that you highlighted that it's kind of creating a nice little digest for you.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to kind of look back and so you won't forget that stuff, you know?
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool service. And if you use Apple Books or Kindle Books or Kobo Books,
it pulls from a lot of different sources.
Yeah.
Not just those, any of note services, Evernote, that kind of thing. It's really clever. A lot of times I'll get, like, this is how you sleep train a baby, things that I've, and now my babies are not small anymore.
so you have notes
like
from when they're a
that.
baby.
Yeah, things about diapering.
Can it read all my handwritten notes on the back of junk mail? Because that's my note taking. Is I literally just write on junk mail that's sitting on my desk until it fills up, and then I get another one.
And then you put it in a shoebox
that high tech.
for your daughter to find later.
And you wind up on an episode of Hoarders. Yeah, that's the way it'll go. No.
All right. Well, we have more news to get to. We're going to talk about this university president outing, whether or not it is about anti-Semitism or something else. I'm going to spoil it for you and tell you it's about something else. It's couched in racism, and we're going to try and break through that to talk about how it's actually about warmongering. I just gave you the whole story, but
okay, then you don't have to tune in. Thank
but
you.
I'm going to give you more than that later, so hang on to that. We're also going to talk about this new symbol of Portugal, how the government has just changed it because they want to change their history. We're going to invite Alexandro Guerreiro on to talk about whether or not the Portuguese like it or hate it. What do you think? All of that coming up. But first, we want to tell you about our sponsor, Provia. So if you are one of the millions of American men and women of any age dealing with premature hair loss, then maybe you want to consider this solution, because now there's a real solution that delivers on its promise without harsh side effects, unwanted chemicals, and no prescription needed. Provia uses a safe natural ingredient called Procapsul to effectively target the three main causes of premature hair thinning and loss by supporting healthy scalp circulation. The delivery of nourishing nutrients and healthy hair follicles are anchoring to your scalp. Provia guarantees more hair on your head than in the shower or on your comb. Effective for men and women of any age and safe on colored, treated, and styled hair. It's just that easy. So right now you can save over 50% plus free shipping on Provia's introductory package by going to provia.com/redacted. Every package includes a full 60-day supply of Provia serum for daily use, plus the Provia Super Concentrate for faster, more noticeable results. And every order includes your choice of free gift right now. Provia works, it's guaranteed, or your money back 100%. So don't wait. Order now and save an extra 10% off just in time for the holidays at proviahair.com/redacted.
Now, we checked this URL, and apparently this URL is not working. Okay.
Yet.
So, I guess they're working on it. The Provia team is like fixing it or getting it together or something. But anyway, so if you just go to proviahair.com, just go to their main website and use the code redacted, then you'll get the 10% off. So the main website works. I guess the URL, the /redacted is, they're still working on that, I guess. But anyway, go to proviahair.com and then use the code redacted at checkout, and everything should work just fine, the 10% off.
Right. All right. Well, we are being invited to argue about race in order to hand power to warmongers. Does that sound familiar? That is exactly how Barack Obama was reelected, because we were told that the opposition to him was because everyone else was racist. No one ever brought it up that he was a warmonger in the Middle East.
That he killed innocent civilians, bombed indiscriminately all throughout the Middle East.
That was never brought up
president
by any side. Go ahead.
First president to assassinate 2 U.S. citizens with no due process. I think that's an important one.
That never came up.
And he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
It was always about race, right? The conversation around Hillary Clinton was around gender, not that she started wars in Libya. So here is another sort of racial distraction, in my view, sort of taking away the conversation that should be happening around the war in Israel. Because people who criticize Israel right now continue to be called anti-Semites. It's kind of a trump card. Like, oh, you don't think Israel should be defending itself? Anti-Semite, that's a trump card that ends the conversation, right? And Congress is now grandstanding about it. This is about a right to criticize Israel's response in Gaza, which is an atrocity in a reaction to an atrocity on October 7th. It's saving no one. It's helping no one. It's making the lives of Jewish people harder and making straight out taking the lives of Palestinians. So let's look at how the silencing of this narrative is playing out in Ivy League schools as a tricky trap about race, hiding a real conversation about war. So last week, top university presidents from Harvard, UPenn, and MIT testified about disciplinary practices on college campuses due to the threat of Jewish students in the wake of the war in Israel. Now, these clips went viral when these women refused to say that threats to Jewish students were punishable by their codes of conduct, because you can't threaten people. You can't say incitable speech, right? Let's go blow up whatever. Let's go get these people. You cannot do that. It does not matter the race. You can't say that.
It's illegal.
Right. Yeah, it's illegal and also against the codes of conduct. What Congress wanted from them is saying only attacking these groups of people is wrong, and that any criticism of Israel is an attack on these people, and you must say that and write it down. Now, I want to set up this clip because the representative who is leading this is a heinous person named Heinous Performance here. I don't know what she's like personally.
That's a terrible name to be born with.
What?
Heinous Performance.
That's not her name.
Oh, I thought her name was Heinous.
Saying this is Heinous Performance by person named
Senator Heinous?
Elise Stefanik. In my view, acting in the role of Dolores Umbridge, and I'm going to make this connection. So Potter fans, hang on here. She's furthering the authoritarian regime that forbids critiques of Zionism. She mistakenly says that an intifada is a call for genocide of Jews. That's not true. She's lacking context here. She's just specifically just not doing her studying. I'm going to play it, and we'll probably interrupt it a few times because it's a bit long. But watch this grandstanding here that has launched an entire conversation and distraction from war.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
Okay, let's pause for a second, if you don't mind. What she's saying, nobody has said they're calling for, she's not referring to any specific call for a genocide. She's referring to an intifada, which she interprets as a call for the genocide of Jews. And what these university presidents are saying is, we can't say intifada is not allowed because universities are supposed to be a place for free speech. And so they're hesitating to say that because, one, they have not actually heard that. Two, if somebody were actually inciting that, of course that would be punishable. And three, they want to leave space for people who want to call for Palestinians to rise up for their own freedom. Rise up for your own freedom does not automatically mean genocide of the oppressor, right? Can we agree that? Yes?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and so we're just leaving space to have this conversation, and she's saying, oh no, we can't have the conversation. Even saying intifada is a call for a genocide is a trump card, the same way that criticizing the Zionist government is anti-Semitic. She's asking them to put into law and practice a trump card that shuts down the conversation that needs to be happening about war. So watch her feeling pretty stinking good about herself, thinking she's got them, Because of this, sorry, we can keep going.
Decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide?
That's so stupid. She's so
The speech is
stupid
not
for saying
harassment. This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's
Like she
code of
doesn't
conduct?
understand. Like she just doesn't understand that, yeah, there needs to be some kind of space to call for a rising up against an oppressor. That Palestinian students should say this. Go ahead, Philip.
And that's like not calling for a ceasefire is the opposite of that then. That's calling for a genocide on the other side.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and so you could interpret that Israeli students or any Zionist supporters saying no to ceasefire would be calling for a genocide of Palestinians. Yep, absolutely, that could be interpreted that way, but that is never mentioned here.
When it comes to bullying and harassment.
Yeah, okay, let's let her go on. And just to see how stupid she is, let's let her go on a little bit longer.
Oh, sorry.
Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, targeted at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate
let's cut her
Harvard's
off, 'cause
rules
she's
of bullying
just so
and harassment?
obnoxious. She really thinks that she's got these ladies. Like, you don't understand your own free speech policies, and you don't understand what an intifada is, and you don't understand the context here that, Jews are the ones being victimized on campus only, which we know is not true. We've seen Jewish and Palestinian and Middle Eastern students alike all being targeted. So I think I can't help it because I see her in this tweed jacket and she is promoting this behavior that's advancing the agenda of authoritarianism, and I can't not see this. So I put her picture side by side with Dolores Umbridge, because if you know your Potter, you know that Dolores Umbridge is an archetype of a powerful politician who shuts down questioning of all government narratives that are inconvenient, and she is playing this role beautifully. That is what's on display. She's asking the university presidents to condemn students' rights to be critical of Israel and couching it in anti-Semitic racism, and she's backing them into a corner and not allowing them to explain. Now, if you were to push and say, well, a call to an intifada is not the same as a call for a genocide to Jews, you should not say this, but we are a university where free speech is important. We should talk about these things, but you cannot incite violence. She's not hearing this because you cannot question the Ministry of Magic, or in this case, the U.S. government's support of Israel. After this display of sheer ego, these ladies were hung out to dry to appease big donors. Here, Penn donor pulled out $100 million gift over anti-Semitism furor, and it just kept going. Now, Penn President Liz McGill apologized the next day. Didn't help any. She still was ousted. She explained that she had been erroneously focused on the constitutional right to free speech, and she apologizes for that. Here is part of her apology.
There was a moment during yesterday's congressional hearing on anti-Semitism when I was asked if a call for the genocide of Jewish people on our campus would violate our policies. In that moment, I was focused on our university's longstanding policies aligned with the U.S. Constitution, which say that speech alone is not punishable. I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate. It's evil, plain and simple. I want to be clear. A call for genocide of Jewish people is threatening, deeply so. It is intentionally meant to terrify a people who have been subjected to pogroms and hatred for centuries and were the victims of mass genocide in the Holocaust.
Okay, but who said that? Who called for a genocide of Jews by being critical of the Israeli government? Because anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and we have to commit to knowing the difference.
A number of people in the chat room just said that exact same phrase. Being anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic.
Right, and so saying that you want an intifada, meaning you want these people to free themselves of an oppression from Israel, is not anti-Semitic, right? And so, yes, they could have explained themselves better, but the problem is that universities have no longer become a place for free speech. So when they're saying, well, we have to allow free speech on both sides, but we do want people to be safe, we don't allow inciting violence, they didn't say that because it would ring hollow in the last decade or more of not protecting free speech, of canceling professors, of shutting down things that might hurt people's feelings, of, only one side of the political agenda. And so now Liz McGill has resigned, and the other two, there are calls for their resignation from Congress now. Here is a bipartisan House resolution led by Umbridge asking for these women to resign, the two who have not. They're saying it has bipartisan support because, of course, they're all warmongers. It would not be law. It would just be Congress adopting a resolution that they want. Can you imagine Congress saying who should and shouldn't run universities? Right now, that's what they're doing.
That's the problem I have is, so they're there to govern. How the hell is this governing? What is it like? They're not there to regulate all of our behaviors across the board, across the country. It's like freaking govern.
Right.
Pass some bills.
That's
do some
news
laws.
to them.
Do what you're there for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this comes after Harvard has voted not to oust Harvard's president, Claudine Gay. This week, the board voted that they would support her, even though there is this backlash. The public wanted her head too, and when Harvard voted that it would support her, I mean, what did she do? Is she said, no, we want to protect free speech, right? And that threats to violence are context specific, and that threats to violence are already not allowed. And we can't only protect one group. That's what she's saying. She did not say that eloquently, but that's what they all were committing to. Now the media has come for her saying that she plagiarized her work. Here comes from the New York Post. You can see how this is playing out, right? They expected this Black woman to shut down criticism of Israel, and she refused. And because of that, now she's being presented as this unworthy affirmative action baby, that she doesn't deserve to be there because she cheated. She betrayed this code of marginalized groups not standing up for one another. And now she must pay. Well, here's some examples of the plagiarism that the Post found. It's paraphrasing, to be sure. There are a few of them. I'll just sort of play them throughout the screen without reading them to you. And you should decide for yourself if this is plagiarism. It certainly seems like she should have attributed these things, but she's hardly passing them off as her own research. None of this is her thesis or her conclusion that she's taking from somebody else. These are supporting points in her academic work that she found clearly from other resources and didn't. She says, I can go back and just properly attribute those things. Is it embarrassing? Yes. Is it plagiarizing? I don't know. But here's the question. Would a white person be punished harsher for this? Maybe. Does this mean she doesn't deserve that job? I don't think that this is the thing that you lynch whether or not she deserves that job. Now, is Harvard choosing who to support and who not to based on ideology? Well, clearly they've been doing that for decades, right? Does it mean that this one person is who it lynches on? Universities have mopped themselves into a corner with this. If they put their foot down now, full stop, and say, well, we support free speech and intifada is allowed under that paradigm, we wouldn't have this discussion, but they have no reputation for that. And of course, Jewish students have been targeted, as well as Muslim students, and that is already not allowed. We showed you this video from just a few weeks ago. This is a Jewish student at Harvard who was walking to class and was harassed. This is, again, not allowed.
Yeah, that's illegal.
Yeah.
A Jewish student's like walking to class and people surround him and like try to basically want to beat the shit out of him.
It would still be illegal if he were Chinese.
Yeah.
It would still be illegal if the other people were Japanese. It would be illegal no matter what.
Right.
It would be not allowed.
I think what's rich, though, is these universities are now pretending that they're a bastion of free speech, right? Like, no,
Yeah.
we've always been a bastion of, over the past 20 years, we've really been a bastion of free speech. In fact, it's total bullshit because they've created free speech zones within the university. Like there's like a circle that you could stand in. We covered this in my time at Fox, we covered these universities going woke and creating like free speech zones where you could go and stand in a circle. And then you could say in that circle whatever you wanted. And it was like behind an outhouse and hidden behind campus, you know?
Yeah.
These universities aren't free speech zones. Like they're really trying to protect that. That's such a canard.
It rings very hollow, right? So even if there was a sincere, and I think that probably academics want to say, well, we definitely do have empathy for Palestinian students who feel this way, and we want to leave space for them. It rings hollow because that's not what universities have done. They've been protecting small, these groups of people. So Jewish students are like, well, you got to protect us because you protect everybody. And so we can't have our feelings hurt. And so then there's no right for Palestinian students to feel that way too, or else you protect both sides of the coin. It's a losing battle. Here's what Jonathan Haidt says about this. He's the author of The Coddling of the American Mind. He says, the only way to end anti-Semitism on campus is to end identitarianism. You can't be satisfied with university presidents who say, oh, we'll have a new center on anti-Semitism or whatever. It's not going to have an effect as long as there's a critical mass of students who are taught to see everything through oppressor-victim glasses, and which punching up is virtuous, and when the punching is not, even when the punching is not metaphorical. So what I think here is that this is all governing around a protection of Israel so that we can't have a real discussion about Israel's response. This is about clamping down on free speech, and it's new to universities because they have not done this. So how can we trust what their intention is? I don't know, right? But should we be arguing about the race of the victims or the people at this point, or should we be really talking about the war? And as uncomfortable as it is, it seems that universities should be a place where we can talk about the war.
And that's why, in my opinion, the rights have to be kept on the individual level, because as soon as you give rights to a whole group, you have to take rights from the individual against that group, right? So if people are doing bad things, there's already tons of laws in place to do something to them. But when they give all these groups these special rights, then it takes the individual right away from protesting or saying anything about that group whatsoever. You can't even say anything like somewhat negative about this situation right now, or you're anti-Semite.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It shuts down. I think people who throw those terms around, though, are pretty ignorant, because anyone who throws a term around like that, it means they haven't done the homework, and it shuts down conversation.
Or they don't want you to continue to discuss it.
Right. This is what Tucker has always said when people would say, you're a racist, you're an anti-Semite. He's like, shut up. It's like, because what it does is it simply just shuts down conversation. It totally shuts down conversation, and you haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
And also, it's interesting. When these politicians get up there and grandstand in front of the cameras, don't be fooled by that, guys. Don't be fooled by that. These guys are bought and sold and paid for by these lobbying groups. So Stefanik, of course, makes tens of thousands of dollars from
also,
Israel.
she will fundraise on this.
Oh, she already has. And by the way, she's already raised tens of thousands of dollars from pro-Israel lobbying groups that funnel money to her.
Yeah.
So when she's up there grandstanding and looking like she's just making so much money off of it. Follow the money, people. Don't be stupid. Wake up on this if you're falling
we've
for
become
that.
we're being governed by like the social media Congress. Like they don't care about policy. They don't care about their platforms. They care about sound bites that you can put on like TikTok to get their popularity up. It's like it's become purely popularity, but it's all sound bites. They don't actually care what the outcome of any of that is. They're just like, ooh, look, I got this sound bite of me roasting this person, you know, and that's all they care about.
But
that's what we've come to.
And watching the reaction to that clip where she really was feeling her ego inflated by I really got them, and you watch other people on Twitter who just took the bait. They're like, oh my God, you are anti-Semitism. How can you say that? You know, and they're allowing themselves to sell themselves the idea that other people don't get it like you do. Wow, it feels so good that I'm not anti-Semitic. Those people don't get it. What a world we live in, right? Then you're taking the bait, and the conversation then is not about actual anti-war movements on college campuses, which at one point were a beautiful thing in American history. Ever heard of Vietnam, right? We can't have that now. This is a distraction. And if you are fired up that, wow, I'm really not a racist and other people are, feels good to watch this and see how other people have it wrong, you might want to check yourself, because you're selling yourself a superiority complex in order to not talk about what. Now, surprisingly enough, CNN's Fareed Zakaria pointed this out over the weekend about how universities have just lost their credibility for free speech, so it's hard to believe them. And I was shocked that this take on not coddling students and actually allowing anti-war voices was aired on CNN. So let's give it a little time here on Redacted too.
A white man studying the American presidency does not have a prayer of getting tenure at a major history department in America today. Grade inflation in the humanities is rampant. At Yale, the median grade is now an A. New subjects crop up that are really political agendas, not academic fields. You can now major in diversity, equity, and inclusion at some colleges. The ever-growing bureaucracy devoted to diversity, equity, and inclusion naturally recommends that more time and energy be spent on these issues. The most obvious lack of diversity at universities, political diversity, which clearly affects their ability to analyze many issues, is never addressed, showing that these goals are not centrally related to achieving or sustaining or building excellence. Out of this culture of diversity has grown the collection of ideas and practices that we have now all heard of: safe spaces, trigger warnings, microaggressions. As the authors Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff have discussed, many of these colleges have instituted speech codes that make it a violation of university rules to say things that some groups might find offensive. Universities advise students not to speak, act, even dress in ways that might cause offense to some minority groups. With this culture of virtue signaling growing, the George Floyd protests erupted and many universities latched on and issued statements effectively aligning their institutions with these protests. By my memory, few took such steps even after 9/11 or during the Iraq War. In this context, it is understandable that Jewish groups would wonder, why do safe spaces, microaggressions, and hate speech not apply to us? If universities can take positions against free speech to make some groups feel safe, why not us? Having coddled so many student groups for so long, university administrators found themselves squirming, unable to explain why certain groups, Jews, Asians, don't seem to count in these conversations. Having gone so far down the ideological path, these universities and these presidents could not make the case clearly that at the center of a university is the free expression of ideas, and that while harassment and intimidation would not be tolerated, offensive speech would and should be protected.
Okay, so let us know what you think of this. I see lots of people saying they don't agree with our take on this or my take on it. Let me know why that is. Do you think that?
No, there's a lot of people that agree with you. There's a lot of people that disagree with you, but that's how you have a conversation.
Yeah, I want to know why. Do you think that universities should say that there should be no talk about an intifada or any criticism of Zionist reactions? Is that the...
Right, are you not allowed to speak out on genocide?
That's what, well, yeah. No, there's...
Right, but my
I
point
think
is,
that's the only
I'm
other
being
alternative,
sarcastic.
right?
I'm being sarcastic here, but I mean, if you went onto a college campus and said, you know, can we stop the genocide that was in former Eastern Ukraine killing ethnic Russians? Like if you were the only person probably on a college campus since 2014 saying, you know, no more of this, you know, you'd be yelled at and called a Putin apologist. You know, that's what you're labeled if you're criticizing that. So is this speech allowed? I mean, these universities are fooling themselves. And I agree with Fareed Zakaria. This culture of diversity, these free speech zones, these trigger warnings, these microaggressions, you better watch out. You better not do that to another student because that's a microaggression. They can't handle conversation.
So anyone who is applauding any kind of resistance in Palestine or resistance to to evacuations or whatever that is, right, and saying, no, fight back, keep your land, Gaza, then that is threatening to the Zionist government. And then that you extrapolate that that's anti-Semitic.
Right. Then you make the leap.
And they should not be allowed to say it.
Then you make the leap that you're also somehow pro-Hamas, a terrorist organization which beheads people and kills people. Like you're then pro-Hamas.
Right.
And then you're also then anti-Israel. And then you're also.
But these are huge leaps that we're not allowed to take, that we're taking because we can't discuss it. We only take those leaps because we can't talk about it.
Right.
That's why it's so important to be free speech absolutist and to protect free speech at all costs, because we have seen like I remember a time when we would see something on Twitter and they're like, oh, China's blocking these words. And we're like, oh, man, I would hate to be in China. That's never going to come here. But the more we let them take it, a single ounce, like they can convince people, OK, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't allow people to say this because, yeah, that is pretty bad. Nobody's getting hurt, but it is pretty bad to say that. So we'll take that. OK, we all agree. Now that we have that, well, now we got to take this because this also is making people feel bad. And it's like it just keeps going away more and more and more. And it's getting to the point where we're not going to be able to say anything. So that's why we have to protect it at its core, because we're losing it every single day.
Right. Yeah. And handing the rules of university over to Congress is terrifying. So for Congress to say, we want to pass a resolution to demand the resignation of these university heads, meaning now, I mean, already it seems like universities are parroting government talking points, but that will just be directly the case, that the Ministry of Magic is interfering at Hogwarts, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right?
Escape the Matrix says most of my comments are being removed here. Yeah, you know, YouTube is very big on censorship. So if you said something that YouTube doesn't like, they probably removed it. That's not us, though. So I see your comment, though, Escape the Matrix. But yeah, please be specific. Like if you just yell out, if
you're off base on this, or
you're wrong on this, then please be specific. Tell Natalie like what specifically she's wrong with factually. Provide historical context, maybe even, reference different books and materials. We're open to this conversation, but to yell out, you hate Jews or you hate Palestinians, you're pro-Hamas, you're anti-Putin. It really is ignorant. Let's be honest, right? And it just shuts down conversation. So be specific. If you make a charge, we're having a dialogue here. We showed you videos of Jews being attacked on campus. Like that's happening. So there's no denial of that.
And it's not allowed. It already was not allowed. We did not need Dolores Umbridge to grandstand about it.
And she's, by the way, making money off of it. And she's making tens of thousands of dollars from the Israeli lobby. You should pay attention to where these people get their money from. So when they're getting up there in front of cameras and she knows the cameras are on her, she's doing this whole dog and pony show so she can look good to other people. So don't fall for it. Anyway, we should question everything, but we should have an open and honest dialogue about it. I loved something that Charlie Kirk did a few years ago. He went to a college campus and he sat there and a person came up to him and said, what are you doing here? And he says, having a conversation. The moment we can't have a conversation is when we descend into civil war. And so we should all be able to have a conversation. You should be able to tell me the facts, present facts. We have a dialogue back and forth about those facts. And we come to a mutual agreed upon decision, hopefully, on how this unfolds. But right now, people are dying. Tens of thousands of people are dying. Jews are being killed. Jewish soldiers are being destroyed. They're being killed. We don't know what those numbers are. And Palestinians are being destroyed. That's what's happening right now. So we should be able to have a dialogue about it here on the show.
Right. And I guess I really take offense to these, like, oh, you just must not like Jews, or you don't like Israel, or you don't like... What I like does not matter. You shouldn't come here for that. Like, you come here for journalism, for research. That's not... Almost nothing here I like. I don't like that this is happening. I don't like the war. There's nothing to like. It's not for me to promote anything that I like. The only thing I really like are peanut butter and tortillas.
Right.
And so, like, that's not what you come to Redacted for.
It's all based on assumptions, too. It's like if you say anything about Biden on Twitter, then you're a Trump supporter. If you say anything about Trump, you're a Biden supporter. It's like if you say one thing to call out something that's going wrong with one group, that doesn't mean you hate the group. You're being critical of a thing that they're doing. And you're doing that because you want to see them stop doing that bad thing, not because you hate them, because it's a wrong thing to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I think you should all want to know, like, why did so many people make millions of dollars off of the October 7th attack and made money trading stocks ahead of time? Like that should really piss a lot of people. I would love to know the people who were making millions of dollars off of that. They knew about it. Like that should anger a lot of people, but that's not even being talked about. In the mainstream media. That's being totally ignored.
All right. Well, we had an uncomfortable conversation. We have been asked a lot to cover more Israel and Gaza, but it gets hot when we do it, and we have to, right? There's a war going on.
Well, we cover it every day, whether we cover it here on this show or in our newsletter. It's either we cover it one or the other every day here on the show, pretty much. So it's always a topic of discussion. So we'll be covering it tomorrow on the show as well. I know it gets hot. It gets hot. That's right. Anyway, we got more news to get to here. We're going to look at Portugal. The country of Portugal is perhaps the first country to cancel its own logo. You know how like all these sports teams, the Washington Redskins, they got rid of that. Now they're the Washington Commanders and all that garbage. Well, now Portugal is the first country to officially do that, basically to its iconography, not necessarily to its flag, but to its main symbols, canceling its own history because of woke ideology. Wokeness has invaded Portugal, just like the Spanish did hundreds of years ago and the Africans did hundreds of years ago. We'll talk about that. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because they have a brand new savings account that they've just rolled out, a cash sweep account, which allows you to, make 5.1% APR in your account, even if you're not investing. So, for instance, like I said, I was waiting on what the Fed was doing today and what CPI numbers were looking like, and I've got cash sitting there in that account, and it's earning 5.1%. Then if I invest in certain commodities companies, different oil and gas companies, different mining companies, great. Then I make my investments. And then when I sell those stocks, guess what? It goes back into that 5.1% API savings account. That's an amazing return for a savings account. Your local bank does not have a savings account like that. Most of them are 0.01% if you're lucky. So again, if you want to try out one of the best trading apps available with all of these additional bells and whistles that they give you for free, and you're getting 15 free stocks when you sign up right now, 15 free stocks. Just go to redacted.inc/Moomoo today to sign up. Try out this new savings account that they've got. It's really fantastic, and it's up to $1 million in FDIC insurance, by the way, for your funds. So 5.1% API account that they've just rolled out, and you get 15 free stocks when you open your account and make your initial deposit. So go to redacted.inc/Moomoo today to give it a try.
Well, taking down statues and canceling historical figures is one thing, but changing a country's official symbol because of the cancel culture, that seems to be what Portugal has done. That makes it the first country to change its national logo explicitly for ideological reasons in at least recent history. Many Portuguese are saying that this is a woke move. Is it? So today we have Alexandre Guerreiro with us. He's a political science professor and Portuguese as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to join you today. Yeah.
So let's take a look at the old flag, or this is a symbol based on the flag that has some crests and crenellations. And then the new one looks like maybe kindergarten toys. What is your reaction to this?
Well, basically, something that the government knows that they can change is the flag, the official flag. They can't touch it without the consent or without the referendum by the Portuguese public. So what did the government decide to do? They decided to change the coat of arms, not the official coat of arms of the state, but the coat of arms of the government. For me, this is this is absurd. This doesn't make any kind of sense at all. This is basically a move in order to start to increase the symbolism of everything that's concerned with our history, with Christianity, with all the centuries that we had in the past. This is a move to try to brainwash the public and to make the public forget that we had all this history. Because from time to time, not only the government, but also some political parties, they come to not only to the newspapers, but also to the public, saying that we have a bad image as a colonial power, a former colonial power, and we need to forget our past and to forgive and to ask every other people to forgive us for what was our history. This is a woke move indeed, because they defended that this new symbolism is part of an attempt to be more inclusive towards all different minorities that we had dealt with all over our history, which means that we will have to forget Christianity. We have to forget even the symbolism, for example, of the five wounds of Christ, all the seven castles, the way that we conquered that. It was thanks to that we are presently today Portugal. And in my opinion, this is a gross violation of our history and the rejection of what was our history and what was our heritage.
So do you think there's like a cutoff point then, because Portugal was colonized by the Moors first? So I guess that doesn't matter. It's only based on modern, I guess, since the 1500s, colonization since then. So that seems selective. But I'm an expat in Portugal, and since I've been here, it has always struck me as how the cancel culture is selective. It's okay to cancel Salazar, but not, say, Vasco da Gama. And so can you explain how that plays out into this sort of selective picking and choosing of what history to present to the world?
According to that kind of supporters of that wave or of that kind of initiative, they just want to have and to remain, to keep in the history books what was considered to be positive. For example, Vasco da Gama, he was a navigator because he reached out to India, and he wasn't whatsoever linked with any kind of slavery or a slavery industry from that period. So that's why we think that it was part of globalism, and so Vasco da Gama is seen as a good person from our history. But
right,
however,
but he killed lots of Muslims. He was out specifically.
That doesn't matter. But indeed, he had killed lots of Muslims.
Like he went out to do it on commission of the church. So
and participated on the campaign connected to slavery. So, but because people, when think about him, they remember only the way he went to India in 1498. So they just want to make it to be the only memory that they have about Vasco da Gama. Concerning Salazar, of course, we can't discuss, for example, Salazar and other political figures, for example, like one of our last kings, King Don Carlos I, who was actually one of the most reformist kings. But what they want here to make people know is that King Carlos was linked with a dictatorship, but they don't want to remember the good part of that king. So this is what we think it's the paradox and the hypocrisy connected with all this woke, not only the political parties, but with the system as a whole, because they just say that they want to support a more inclusive image from our government and from our country. But what we look is not to a symbol of inclusivity. What we see is just a square, a rectangle, and a circle with 3 different colors that could be from, for example, from any other African country. What they are trying to do is to deny the history of the country. So they want to cancel everything connected with slavery. For example, one of the best and most beautiful paintings that we have is at the Portuguese Parliament, and we had already heard some political parties from the left defending that canvas should be removed from the Parliament because it was a painting, for example, of the arrival of Vasco da Gama to India, and the way that Vasco da Gama was received by the people from India, because they say that it represents inequality, and it also represents an image of an oppressor power towards the different peoples from the world. And basically what most people don't know, especially when they connect Portugal to slavery and to the history of slaves, is that those who used to sell slaves to Portugal were the Africans itself. Actually, there is also an important image of one of the queens of what is now known as being Angola. She was seated in, she made a human chair. For example, if you think, so it was the one of the queens from one of the tribes of Angola. She treated her own tribe as slaves, and then she sold those slaves to the Portuguese. So if you want...
Yes, I believe that story goes that she was meeting with a Portuguese to arrange selling slaves, and the Portuguese man did not offer her a chair. She was pissed off, and she said, well, I'll make my own chair. And she forced one of her slaves to come and be said chair. Yes, yeah, I do know this story.
It. So, but many people don't know, even in Portugal, they don't know about this story. So it happened. You have 2 chances. You have either to choose, okay, this was part of our history. Today, we are not going to defend this as being a part of the policy of the state. Of course, we will reject all kind of oppression towards humanity. But back then, 5 years ago, it was considered to be normal. So we have to deal with that. It was part not only of our history, but even from the African history and from Asian history. It was part of it. We have to deal with it. It was a period in our history now. Get over it. But the truth is, we have a country with almost 900 years of age. So, of course, we had a lot of atrocities. We didn't came to become known as Portugal just for being gentle towards our occupiers. We had the Spanish occupying the country, we had the Moorish, like you just said minutes ago. So this is a kind of a way just to clean our image towards this woke wave that we are currently facing worldwide. And I don't think that it actually will work, because people were already dealing with the Portuguese symbols as being part of what we are today, not as being a symbol of oppressors. What will be our next step? To remove all crosses from our symbols, for example, because I know that in some Arab countries, you can't exhibit, you can't demonstrate any kind of cross. What are you going to do? Are you going to do like in the football, like it happened in football more or less 10 years ago, when Inter Milan, which used to have a cross on their jersey, they had to remove it when they were going to play in Turkey, because it was considered to be the symbol of crusaders. This is absurd. So I thought that Europe was the continent where we actually learned how to deal with all these phenomena. But it seems not, because now you have some extremism trying to dominate the Portuguese politics and European politics as a whole, and try to reject and to avoid our symbols, which cannot be touched.
Yes. And the thing that strikes me is that we are not that anymore. America was a land of conquerors, and we still do. In some ways, we're in Syria right now, but we don't want that, right? Most American people don't want to be conquerors anymore. The Portuguese are not colonizing anymore. And so this idea that the world was violent for everybody, it's not now. Do you think we lose sight of the fact that we actually have it better, and we lose the opportunity to, I guess, acknowledge what we are in this point in time, and that it is okay to be Portuguese and be proud of that.
Yes, of course, definitely. We are kind of losing the opportunity. For example, Salazar. Why is Salazar a forbidden topic, not only at schools, but also at the universities?
Right. This is something that has, I've read many biographies of Salazar, and I'm always like, when is he going to get bad? Like, it seems like he made unpopular decisions, but he was not a cruel person. And as it's taught to my children in school is a completely different thing than what actually happened.
But even if we wanted to share a negative idea of Salazar, why can't we discuss his legacy? Why can't we discuss and allow other people to demonstrate and to express what actually Salazar did of good, which actually most people forget, that Salazar had a country that was in ruins. It was a bankrupt country. And he didn't not only organize the finances of the country and the economy of the country, but he also was trying to bring a new country to become respected worldwide. So, of course, it takes time. And 100 years ago, of course, it would take time. But people don't understand it, that they just want to share an idea, especially at schools. They just want kids to believe that Salazar was an evil person. He had absolutely nothing of good that he did. And they just want to keep brainwashing not only children, but people. For example, I remember when I was at school here in Portugal, I was in primary and then in other grades. What was taught at school back then was that the Soviet Union, everything in the Soviet Union was absolutely bad. There were no good things about it. And of course, it had its negative aspects, but it also had a lot of virtues. But people just want to take people to their own side, to pick their own, they want people to choose, to pick sides. And of course, if you have to pick a side, come to my side. We have two trenches. So you have to be with us or you have to be against us. You can't discuss. You can't be a third way. And this is the problem, not only with Salazar, but with many incidents over history. Our kings, our monarchical period. You don't need to be a supporter of the monarchy to recognize how good a lot of our kings were. So we have to discuss this. And it was supposed to be done, that discussion, at the academies, at the universities. Yet what we witness more and more is that cancel culture prevailing over this kind of discussion of these topics. So it's quite negative. We are losing a huge opportunity to at least share and exchange some kind of arguments about that.
Yes, I agree. I would love for university students to study Salazar as a lesson in how to stay out of war. I think everybody should at least consider this. Because we need it right now more than ever. So thank you for breaking this down for us. It's just such a strange move, and I'm glad at least there are people who are able to see it for what it is and what it I guess is attempting to do. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on Redacted.
Also, take good care. Bye-bye.
That's going to do it for us here at Redacted today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us this holiday season. We're nearing the end of the year, if you can believe it. It's been a great year here at Redacted. We worked really hard. We learned a lot together. We appreciate you being here. If you would like to continue to support Redacted and you want to sort of signal to the world that you like Redacted, you can check out our Redacted store. Maybe this is something you'd like to gift for the holiday season. You can go to redactedstore.com. You will find all kinds of fun things like our posters about being a peace extremist. One of our best sellers right now is the Friends Don't Let Friends Watch the Mainstream Media. That seems to be true, although I would take that a step further. Maybe we need to change that to Friends Don't Let Friends Quote the Mainstream Media or live their lives by things they learned there, which tend to be lies. Anyway, I don't think that will fit on a pillow. We'll work on that. We'll work on that for our New Year's resolution. But check out what we've got for now, redactedstore.com. We really appreciate you being here. As always, we will be back tomorrow. Remember, the show is live every Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the newsletter. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye, everybody.